Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for National Alzheimer's Awareness Month is Erin Mulcahy Stein, Executive Director with the Women's Alzheimer Movement. Erin, it's great to see you. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Hi, thanks so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk about the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. Thank you.
You got it. And of course, we appreciate the insight in your time. So tell us more about the Women's Alzheimer's Movement.
So we are a nonprofit organization that was founded by Maria Shriver, focused on understanding why Alzheimer's disproportionately impacts women. Women are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's as men, and our organization was the first to really focus exclusively on trying to find out why that is. Of the 5.7 million Americans living with Alzheimer's, 2/3 of them are women. So at the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, we run education programs, research and advocacy programs, all for the purpose of raising awareness about women's increased risks, funding gender-based Alzheimer's research, advocating for policies that help women and their families dealing with the disease, and educating people about how to possibly prevent it.
10 years ago, the organization released a report called the Shriver Report. What was included and what has changed since then?
A lot. So the Shriver Report was published in 2010. It was called A Woman's Nation Takes on Alzheimer's. We did this in partnership with the Alzheimer's Association, and it was a year-long examination of the world of Alzheimer's in women. It reported publicly for the first time that Alzheimer's discriminates against women, and no one really knew why that was. So the report included essays from caregivers and scientists and physicians and policymakers, even including President-elect Joe Biden. And for the next 10 years following that, Maria and our organization really called for more women-focused research and education around women and brain health. And even though we don't have a cure yet, and even though there's still many questions to answer, the landscape has changed for the better since the publication of the report. Let's see, I think when the Shriver Report was published, there was only $500 million spent by the US on Alzheimer's research, when there was $6 billion spent on cancer research and $4 billion on cardiovascular, and yet Alzheimer's is such a big killer of women and men. So this year, so 10 years later, $2.8 billion are spent by the US government, and that's only going to increase as the momentum around this disease and the need for a change increases. And I think also there's more, since the Shriver Report, we've seen much more gender-based research in Alzheimer's at all levels: basic science, clinical research, clinical trials. All of them include women now. There's still a long way to go, but much, much better. And the NIH and the National Institute of Aging, the biggest funder of Alzheimer's research in the world, has just issued what's called a notice of special interest to highlight the urgent need around researching to clarify the sex and gender differences in Alzheimer's. So the Shriver Report has had a big impact, and we're seeing the goodness behind it even now, 10 years later.
Right, and that's quite encouraging. But my question to you is, why are women disproportionately impacted by Alzheimer's? Is it because we live longer? Is there something within our biological makeup that makes us predisposed to it? Is there any science behind that?
Well, it is not just because we live longer. That was the reason why we're where we are now, because for many, many years, we looked at the incidence of Alzheimer's and there was more women, but they just assumed, everyone just assumed it was because women lived longer. But study after study controlled for age and found that women were still getting Alzheimer's at a far outpacing men in that. And so I don't think we know for sure, but we know a lot. So we look at sex and gender specific factors like hormone levels, genetic composition, age-related variables, lifestyle activities, and all of these things provide a basis for research that's essential to really finding out why and being able to answer your question. we at the Women's Alzheimer's Movement are so kind of committed to this that we partnered with the Lou Ruvo Center for Brain Health at the Cleveland Clinic to develop a kind of a first of its kind Alzheimer's Prevention Center designed specifically for women. So it'll be research and clinical care specifically for women. The more we focus on it, the more we can, we might find out. Now, we do know there's been a lot of research on women in menopause and the effect of hormones and the decline of estrogen as a woman ages. And the connection between that and Alzheimer's seems to be quite clear that there is a connection. Hormone replacement therapy, which for years women were told to stay away from. We're now looking at hormone replacement therapy, as a treatment for Alzheimer's in women, potentially. So there's quite a lot, going on in that space.
Yeah, that certainly is encouraging. I saw something go viral over the weekend. It was a former prima ballerina, Spanish ballerina with advanced Alzheimer's. I believe she was somewhere in her 80s. They put headphones on of Swan Lake, and immediately something clicked, and she, with her arms, was able to remember the movement from so many years ago when she actually performed Swan Lake. How important is cognitive therapy and physical exercise for those that suffer Alzheimer's? Do you think that will be part of the treatment as well?
Absolutely. I think that that's where the most excitement in Alzheimer's is right now. In fact, the Lancet report, which is a very well-regarded journal, just released a report the other day saying that over 40% of dementia worldwide could be modifiable through risk reduction strategies. So I don't know if you can understand how momentous a statement that is, because up until very recently, no one talked about prevention. No one talked about, reducing your risks. That was not, we were looking for cures. We were looking for drugs and cures. And now so much of the research is on prevention strategies. And you mentioned one of the most important, which is exercise. Probably, a combination of cardiovascular and strength training exercises. We see great results from people that are committed to an exercise regimen. Exercising your brain as well, doing cognitive training, learning something new, focusing on what's novel, taking a different route home from your office when you get back to your office, brushing your teeth with your other hand, doing things that sort of what it feels like kind of tricking your brain. Those are good things. Those help our brains fire and differently and really keep them younger, if you will. The other modifiable risk factor, of course, is diet. A diet that's high in fiber, fatty acids, and low in sugar is way better than the diets that most of us have grown up with. So, and keeping your gut health, your gut healthy with the healthy microbes, anti-inflammatory foods, less processed foods, increased fermented foods. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of research out there that shows that the kind of diet that you eat has a great impact on your cognitive health.
And Erin, we've seen improvement for women's Alzheimer's research, treatment, and advocacy. What more can be done?
Yes, there's been substantially more sex and gender specific research underway in this last 5 years than ever before. And one of the things that we've learned, which is really important here, is that women's verbal memory is better than men. So all these years, we've been testing cognitive decline with a paper and pencil test, a memory test. Well, women were performing better on those tests and were possibly not diagnosed. So, and we know that early diagnosis is key because that's where the prevention strategies are. That's where the treatments are. So what's really important now is to diagnose early. And learning about women's increased verbal memory skills was key to learning how to diagnose early. So there's a lot more that can be done in those kinds of arenas. And I'd love to come back another time and tell you more about the research that is underway right now, research that Women's Alzheimer's Movement has funded, and we'll be getting lots of the findings in the next several months. So I hope to have much more to report the next time I come.
All right, and we look forward to having you back with that outcome. Erin, thank you so much for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thank you so much.
You got it. And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.